Okay, morning everybody. Is this volume okay? It sounds loud to me. Maybe it's early. That's okay? All right, great. If it's too loud, I can try to mess around with the stuff up here. My name's Sean Talbott. I'm going to speak to you this morning about this, toxic stress and the wisdom of balance. The title that you have in the brochure is the cortisol connection and why stress makes you fat and ruins your health. So I'll talk a little bit about that too. But I want to kind of focus the discussion, and I want it to be a discussion rather than holding your questions till the end. If you have questions, if you see a question, see something on the slide that you have a question about, let's talk about it there. I think we have 90 minutes for this session this morning. So that should give us plenty of time for me to get through my slides and a lot of time for us to have some discussion. Okay? But where I want to try to lead the discussion is towards this concept, not just of stress, but one of toxic stress, which basically means enough stress in your life that it results in a detrimental health outcome. How many people in here have a nutrition background at all? Raise your hands. Okay, just a few. More psychology backgrounds, counseling backgrounds. Okay. I'm a nutritionist. And so I'll be speaking to you today from maybe a little bit of a different perspective than you're used to hearing at a conference like this. I'll typically talk at nutrition conferences, and I'll talk about cortisol and testosterone and neurotransmitters and enzymes and all that kind of stuff. But as a nutritional biochemist, that's what my PhD is in, that's what my training is in. Rather than just making nutrition recommendations or exercise recommendations or stress management recommendations, I really like people to focus back in on the biochemistry of that. So I'll talk quite a bit today about cortisol metabolism or testosterone metabolism. I might talk a little bit about enzyme metabolism, hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase, big long name for an enzyme that's involved in cortisol metabolism. I'll talk a little bit about dopamine and norepinephrine and serotonin balances, things like that. And I do that because, at least in my experience with the people that I work with, it's very empowering for them to know that it's not just the stress that's out there that they need to control, out there in the world, but that stress is causing a physiological or biochemical change in their bodies, and there's lots we know that we can change that. So a great deal of what I'll talk about to you today is this concept of restoring balance in the body that is upset by different stressors that we put ourselves under. Okay? So with that as a lead-in and a context, how many people downloaded the slide set from the website? Okay, the slide set that you downloaded is vastly different than the one that I have here. I have a terrible habit of working on slides on the plane on the way to a conference. So the two website addresses that you see up here, you can contact me through either of those, and I can email you the updated slide set, or you can give me your business card after, and I'll just write on the back of it, send slides, and I can just email it to you. Okay? Apologize for that, but I think this slide set's much better. Has a lot of more really good information. Okay, so the prevalence of chronic stress, right? When I talk to a nutrition conference, right, and there's a room full of dietitians, or I talk to a sports medicine conference and there's a room full of exercise physiologists, this kind of information that you see on this slide, the prevalence of chronic stress, is, I don't know if it's revelation to them, but it's just not something that they're so steeped in it. It's not something that they necessarily study. So when I put up statistics like this that show that studies show that 50 to 60% of all lost working days are related to stress, or the amount of dollars or euros that stress costs us as a society in any industrialized country, the people in those sessions are typically set back on their heels a little bit, that they didn't realize it was that big a deal, right? People, I think, kind of abstractly know stress is a big deal, and abstractly know, yeah, stress is bad for us, but don't know when you actually look at the statistics of disease incidence, of healthcare costs, of lost working days, those sorts of things. Don't know how much it does impact our bodies. The statistics I want you to focus on, though, are the three at the bottom that I've put in red. 65 to 90% of people, these are U.S. statistics, 65 to 90% of the American population have enough stress in their lives that it results in a detrimental health outcome. Whether that health outcome means depression or chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia or any of the purely stress-related diseases. But then we can factor into that also diseases that are not necessarily caused by stress, but are certainly exacerbated by stress. Things that I'll talk about today, things like obesity, things like diabetes, things like maybe not frank diabetes, but interference with blood sugar control. Different types of, perhaps not dementia, but at least problems with memory and problems with memory consolidation and memory recall. So, I mean, no matter what statistics you look at, if you look at the American Psychological Association, 65%, you look at the American Institute of Stress, 90%, it's more people than not who have that much stress in their lives that it's causing a detrimental health outcome. Which, leads me to, start off a lot of the seminars that I give by telling people that I'm going to be speaking to them about the biggest or the most important or the most prevalent health issue facing us today. Because the only health issue that's bigger than that, from a prevalence standpoint, 65 to 90%, is what? Well, there isn't one bigger than that. There's one that's very, very close to that, statistic-wise. Heart disease is about half of everybody, half of the population, so it would be about 50, 55% there. It's 64%. Does anybody recognize that statistic? That's obesity, right? So 64% of the American population is either overweight or obese. And so stress is an even bigger issue if you look at it from an incidence perspective. They're about equivalent if you look at it from a medical cost perspective. Okay, so lots and lots and lots and lots of research on that topic, that stress represents a detrimental health effect to the body. If it's, I think this is important, I'll get into this a little bit later. It's not so much the degree of stress that you're under, it's more the duration of stress that you're under. So the chronicity, the chronic nature of that stress seems to be more important than the degree of the stress, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, but if you look across, just this I did on Saturday, I think. I update this slide every once in a while, where I have a certain set of keyword sets that I'll run through the National Library of Medicine just to give people a perspective of how closely linked the research on stress or chronic stress is to various disease outcomes. And it's not all diseases. Not every disease, of course, is caused by stress. But what I've done here is you have the metabolic and long-term health effects of elevated stress, and then a disease, and then in parentheses you've got the disease. So if we look at obesity, there are, as of last Saturday, there were 2,694 studies, human studies, on the link between chronic stress and the detrimental health outcome, which is obesity, through the biochemistry of stress either increasing appetite, accelerating muscle loss, suppressing fat oxidation, enhancing fat storage. And there are many, many others. It's actually tough to draw a line between the stress and diabetes studies and the stress and obesity studies, because they're pretty much the same condition. A lot of us are, call that condition diabesity now, because it's really the same, different manifestations of the same biochemical situation in the body. But you can go down the list. Heart disease, you can see that we can look at the end outcome, or we can look at the biochemistry of it: elevated lipids, cholesterol, triglyceride levels, elevated blood pressure. We can look at depression, anxiety, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and you can see that's the largest one on the list, 22,491. And that includes not just outcomes of ADD or outcomes of depression or outcomes of anxiety disorder. It also includes biochemical studies in humans where we're looking at the stress and how it upsets the balance between those neurotransmitters, dopamine and norepinephrine and serotonin and the like. And so I'm not going to go through all these different bullet points, but you can see that it's an interesting time to be a nutrition researcher or a biochemical researcher, because you'll see, and I have a slide that speaks to this in a second, there's a very important, I think, convergence of people in my world, right? So I'm trained as a biochemist, and people and I'll say your world, right, just to make the point, this whole idea of mind-body, right? I mean, even when I was in school, which is not a long time ago, I've had my PhD for 10, 12 years, something like that. I would have professors, and I have colleagues now who still think of the separation between the mind and the body. And it's getting less and less and less and less and less. And it's because of these kinds of studies that show us, you know what? The mind can affect the health of the body through these biochemical or these neural or these immune pathways, and vice versa. Right? And I think that's not news to anybody sitting in this audience right now, but you'd be surprised how much of a revelation that is across different conferences that I'll be at. Yeah, question?
I missed what those numbers refer to.
So these are human, these are peer-reviewed, published studies in humans in these either disease states or the biochemistry of that disease state, influenced by stress. Okay. Okay. So whenever I talk about stress to students, we'll use the motif of a lion is the stress, and